Hello, Frizzle fiends. So far, I have read 153 books this year, and 24% of them I've hated in some way, making up a total of 36 books I read this year that I did not like. So here's the books I read in 2023, and we're going to be scrolling through them and reacting to all the 1 and 2 stars. Oh, and there's an extended version of this video for my patrons, so if that's you, hop on over to the extended edition now. So, starting off here with Death Dealers, which I gave 2 stars. There were a lot of things I really liked about this book. The writing was solid and I loved the premise, but it was too sexist. You'll notice that this is a running theme in the books I'm reviewing today, that this is one of my largest turnoffs. I am not reading this book anymore, but I gave up on this book at 40%. I just couldn't stand how it was treating its female character. Singular. All she did was cry, flirt, and wear a shirt that was both way too big on her and strained against her assets. Okay, and then scrolling through, we got 3 stars, a 4-star, and a 2-star. Ooh, and I didn't even write a review for this one. But this one's a self-help book called How to Not Die Alone. Its advice wasn't particularly helpful. Ooh, and then we have another 2 stars, The Umbral Storm. Ugh, this one was so boring, such a slog, and it's so long. 656 pages. No, thank you. I know nothing is really happening in a book when it takes me 2 weeks to read 100 pages of it, then I skip to 90% to see if it's sped up, and saw no significant difference in the plot or tone. This is something I sometimes do when I'm debating whether or not to DNF a book. I'll skip to the end and see if that compels me to read the middle. It's never actually made me want to read the middle, so maybe I should just stop bothering. This year I had a goal to DNF earlier, more books, didn't want to be finishing books I wasn't loving, so a lot of these I'm talking about I didn't finish. And a lot of that is indicated in the review of where I stopped. Ooh, another 2 stars! Where I jumped in with a book 2 and didn't have the best experience with it. Scrolling, hey, another book. A lot of these negative ones at the beginning of the year are the Smithbow finalists, and I got a whole rant video about all of these. The world building and plot setup are so vague as to never feel anything but confusing and convoluted. This is one of those things that I really struggle to find the balance of in my reading because I love books that don't hold your hand, that don't over-explain things, that really just kind of drop you in and let the world explain itself in some ways, but there's a fine line there, because once you go over the line, it's confusing and convoluted and hinders the story from being told. And this was one of those. And we're scrolling, we got a 5-star. I'm gonna talk about my best books of the year and all the 5 stars next video. Very excited about that one. Ooh, another 2-star. Okay, so this one, I didn't think it was the worst. This is old-timey British Navy adventure dealing with colonialism of the China Seas and also body horror, and I just don't appreciate body horror. Ooh, then the 𝐒𝐿𝐒 House Murders. So this is a retelling of And Then There Were None, originally written in Japanese, and it's about a group of college students who go to a secluded island that has a history of murders, and they're the murder mystery club, so they're very excited about this, but then it gets a different kind of exciting when they get picked off one by one. And I feel like I would have liked this book a lot better if I was really into the murder mystery genre, because it has some really convoluted twists, and maybe that would have been really fresh and exciting for someone who was looking for new twists. But for me, I was just like, yeah, that doesn't work. Another reason that I didn't like this book is it's so focused on its mystery plot that it really neglects characterization. This book has like 0 character focused in it, and that's not for me. And then 2 stars to The Ferryman. Now this review, I'm being way too nice in this for how much I really didn't like this book, but I was aware it was from a popular author and I was kind of scared of backlash. I'm a little bit more bold now than I was here at the beginning of the year. It's a tale about the people who are living on a perfect island. Everything is perfect. But then, is it really? And then, you know, you get into the government's lying to you and there's mind wiping and blah, 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 boring. And here is another And Then There Were None retelling. In contrast to the 𝐒𝐿𝐒 House Murders, gave 2 stars, gave this one 4 stars because it was much more character focused. Oh, and then we have Belladonna, called out, DNF at 25%. So this is a YA fantasy romance about a girl who is haunted by the Grim Reaper and she keeps having people around her be killed, and then she starts up like a kind of romance with the Grim Reaper-ish. I didn't get that far because she was so annoying and foolish. Like every time she'd make a single decision, I was like, what? and then she'd just like go on and do it and oftentimes avoid the negative consequences. I'm honestly pretty confused about like how this book has gotten so popular when the main character seems so insufferable. Ooh, our first 1 star of the year! So this is Mysterious Ways, and this one, like my review says, a lot of the problems I had with it weren't about like the plot or the characters or sexism or anything like that. Those were all like okay. The problem was with the prose itself, was with the author's voice, because there was no subtlety, no reading between the lines, no nothing. Everyone was just like 100% literal all the time, from our narration to the dialogue to everything, and there was like no craft to the writing, and it was pretty lame. And one of the things we're doing with the 1 stars is I'm gonna rank the 1 stars against each other. So first we have Mysterious Ways, and right now it gets to be number 1, but we'll see as we add things how they stack up. Then we have Better Than the Movies. This is about a teenage girl, and she's obsessed with rom-coms, and then she has like a little kind of meet cute moment, and she's like, wow, that guy's the one, but then she has to get his attention, so she wants to fake date a different friend, and blah, 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 blah. Convoluted rom-com plot. You know how it goes. She was constantly lying to everyone, and that is what got on my nerves the most. Like, even like friends and family who she had good relationships with, she was just like a compulsive liar. And she was also incredibly vindictive, where she would like plotting her revenges against people, and I'm like, no. Part of just my reading taste is I really like likable protagonists. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be like not lying, immature, self-sabotaging, vindictive people. Then passing some books that I loved, which is fun. Ooh, another 2 star. Okay, this is one I have a lot of feelings about. I think my first sentence of this review kind of says it all. I recommend stopping reading the series at book 10, this is book 12, and not bothering with the last 2 books, because I loved like books 1 through 10 of the series, and then the last 2 books like just dumpster fire, where just like the plot and the character work was just like thrown out. So 2 stars, entirely disappointing. I think if I was ranking most disappointing books of the year, probably this 2 star would be the king, because I was really hoping I would love this last book as much as I'd love the rest of the series, but no. Okie doke. Oh, another 1 star! This is actually high irony, because earlier in the year I made a video that was reading from authors that I had given 1 star and 5 stars to before, and one of them here was Brandon Sanderson. So I read The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, and I gave it 1 star. So as you can see, this video reading from authors that I'd given 1 star and 5 stars to before didn't turn out the best, and that's a pretty negative video if you want to go hear me rant about more things. Because I absolutely hated The Frugal Wizard's Handbook. And one of the many things that I hated about this book is that it dealt with the amnesia trope, which is one that I actually really like. I feel like you can really get interesting character-focused moments out of it, with someone forgetting themselves and then slowly relearning about themselves, and giving them a real good framework to make deliberate, interesting changes as they get to know themselves again, kind of thing. And this book didn't feel like it was really handling that, because it wasn't giving the character any internal conflict as he found out clues about his old life and things. Also, it was boring, even though it had interdimensional time-traveling mafia. How dare. Okay, so let's add this to the list. I think we have to put this above Mysterious Ways because I hated it. By the way, top of the list is most hated, and bottom of the list is least hated but still hated. What's that? Okay, how about we put at the bottom hated, and the top of this list is despised. So then at the end, the top book on this list will be my worst book of 2023. Let's see, can we add pictures here? That'd be fun. Okay, then a 2 stars. This one was in direct reaction to the amnesia story in A Frugal Wizards. I was thinking about like, where have I seen a good amnesia story? And then it came to mind that I read as a teenager The Bourne Identity, which I felt like was a great amnesia story. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna reread that so I can prove how bad Frugal Wizard is. And as you can see, I gave it 2 stars. What I hate about this book, it's twice as long as it needs to be. This book is such a slog, which you think like it has such a good thriller based off of it. How could it be such a slog? Well, the answer is that the movie took the fantastic setup of the book and then completely threw out like most of the rest of the plot of the book because it's a slog. Sexism, of course. And also sexism of our lead, of course. Ooh, and then another 1 star! I don't know if you'll guess this, but this was from the same video that was reading from authors I'd given both 1 star and 5 stars to before. As you can see, we had 2 1 stars in that video. I like all my percentages of this review. I just like it when I do list reviews. It's fun to make. This book is 20% bad technobabble, 40% plot holes, 35% emotionless characters, 5% cheesiness. DNF at 58%. So this is a novel tie-in to the Flash CW TV show. And as a teen, I was a big fan of the Flash CW TV show, so I thought I might like this. But as you can see, even the characters that I love, no. So this is the Flash Hocus Pocus. Let's add it to the list and then rank it. And I think I hated the Flash Hocus Pocus more than Mysterious Ways, but not quite as much as the Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England. So that's where our list is at. Ooh, and the next 2-star. This is a book that's in the genre of like Pacific Northwest horror. And the reason that I hated this book so much is that our protagonist's default emotion is anger. And it was just so abrasive and annoying. Then the next 2 stars, Return of the Griffin. As you can see, I read back to back book 1 and book 2. Book 1, I loved it. Book 2, not so much. And my review here focuses on one part of my hatred for this book, but get this, there was multiple parts of my hatred for this book. And the other part of my hatred for this book was how it dealt with its world building. This book was reveling in complicating its world building so much, it like dropped the emotional character focus through line that I love so much in book 1 and replaced it with like angry USA racism and neo-Nazi plotlines. And we're scrolling. Where's the next book I hated? Ooh, we went quite a while before getting another 2-star. Like, I'm still scrolling. Okay, there it is. This book that I gave 2 stars is House of Suns, and it's super boring. This is a sci-fi book about these people who are traveling the galaxy, and they're all like kind of clones of each other, and then maybe their cloned line is getting wiped out. But the biggest flaw in this book is here. The worst use of first-person narration I've ever seen, because I love first-person narration. Like, it's something that I look for in books, it's something that I really treasure in books because I love that character focus that often comes with it. This had 2 narrators, and they were both first person. And they both had like nearly identical voices, so it was really hard to tell them apart, which also made getting into the story hard because I couldn't tell who the characters were for a while. But then also, even though it's first person, they don't actually take advantage of that, and we don't get to hear about their inner thoughts or emotions. It's just so flat. So it's like, why didn't you just put this in third person? And also, these 2 characters are always together. So having 2 different first person narrators isn't adding anything to the story in like storytelling capacity either. Ooh, and then the next 1 star, Tekla. I wrote a long review because I had a lot to rant about for this book. This book is utterly terrible. I just had to get that out of the way. That's my thesis statement, right? It's both a shrine and a condemnation to toxic masculinity. It's unorganized and boring and depressing. So this is like book 4 or 6 or something of this series, and every other book in the series like I've loved. And then we got this one. It's utterly terrible. And this is about like a fantasy assassin guy, and the plots are usually more like fun and carefree. And then we got this one. Boring and depressing. Our main character is stupid the whole book. Another crime. You know how I don't like unlikable protagonists. He's angry at his wife for teaching reading lessons to impoverished people. Okay, who thought this was a good plot? And the thing is that it's even worse than I made it sound like in this review. So like, I simplified my argument here for the review, but let me expound. Because he's not only angry about the reading lessons, he's angry that his wife is putting herself in danger by making herself politically visible, because this group of impoverished people is part of a labor struggle at the moment, which also has assassins involved. So you would think that this makes our protagonist's concern for his wife more relatable and realistic because he's worried that she's going to get assassinated for doing this. But here's the sitch. His wife is an assassin and has been proven over the previous books to be more deadly than he is. So it's not only that he's angry about this thing about reading lessons, something that's like objectively a good thing that his wife is doing, it's also that he's angry about it in a way that's like, you need me to protect you, weak woman, when like, excuse you. Your wife is not a weak woman, and she can take care of herself. So like, on top of just the sexism of him like presuming that he can dictate his wife's schedule just because he's the husband, there's also the sexism of thinking that his wife can't take care of herself when like she literally can. And then it gets worse. At every turn, he refuses to talk to her or hear her when she tries to talk to him, refuses to acknowledge his own feelings. Like literally is like, I'm not feeling anything. I'm assassin guy, whatever. Actively tries to murder his wife's friends and destroys what she believes in. Yeah, because you know, why have a conversation with something and get in touch with your feelings when you can just like solve your problems with murder, right? That's why I say that this is like a shrine to toxic masculinity. So this is why I also say it's a condemnation to toxic masculinity, because because the relationship was degrading, I kept thinking that this book would get better and our main character would learn his lesson, right? I was thinking that this book was setting it up for like character development where he would overcome his toxic masculinity, because it's such obviously a negative thing in this book. But then it doesn't. He got what he wanted. And his wife was the one who apologized to him. So it feels like the lesson learned at the end of the story is actually toxic masculinity is okay because the hero got what he wanted in the end. And the thing that I hate most is I read the entirety of this book. Me, the girl who DNFs left and right, who has the goal to DNF more because I kept expecting for him to get his comeuppance and he never did. And part of my hatred for this book is that it got me to read the entirety of it and I hated every page. So let's add it to the list. Where do you think it's gonna go? We'll put it here at the bottom and then we'll rank it where it should go. So 𝐓𝐿𝐒 gets to go to the very top of despised. Because however much I hated Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, at least it wasn't offensive. Like, it was incredibly poorly written, but it wasn't sexist. It wasn't a shrine to toxic masculinity. Ooh, and then right after that, on the heels, a 2-star. We have handfuls of male characters and checks notes. 2 women. And another thing that drove me insane about this book is it's constantly using default male language, which to describe groups of men and women, which they specify are both men and women, they just refer to everyone as men. Like, oh, the men. Wasn't a paragraph ago you were talking like it was mixed gender? Apparently everyone's just a man now. Yeah, this book is blatantly sexist and I'm so confused why it has so many positive reviews. Ooh, and then we have Voice of War, which also I have some sexist complaints, but those are more the secondary complaints because the real reasons that I disliked this book was because of the lack of focus to the plots. But the real failure of this book is that the main characters are more reactionary than active. They don't have goals or wants that they're working towards. Like, they do have things that they want, like, vaguely. Like one of the characters who's grown up in a secluded, shuttered society wants to get out and see the world. But is she, like, actively working towards that? No. Because there's other unfocused plots revolving around her and things get distracted and doesn't actually make progress in that very much. Then we have Lost in Time, which when you hear the premise for this book sounds so good. Murder? Time travel to dinosaur times? Count me in! No, it's a boring book. It drags. The only reason that I didn't DNF it sooner than 53% is because it was my audiobook while I was doing a long road trip and I didn't have anything to replace it with. So I was like, might as well keep listening. And then as soon as I got done with the road trip, done with this book. Did not listen to it anymore. And our next 2-star, I love my review for this one. I'm at the stage of things I don't yet. I'm still driving around in circles waiting for something to happen, which is a direct quote from chapter 20 of this book, but it also felt like that's what the whole book was. This is about a guy in like a medieval fantasy world who is cursed to become an assassin to try to kill the woman who he also has a crush on, so you'd think that sounds like juicy drama. He's also like a werewolf? Like yeah, let's throw that in. No. The entire book is driving around in circles waiting for something to happen. Ooh, and then we have the next 2-star. So the premise of this book was, in fact, really good. This is a sci-fi romance, or as I like to call it, sci-romance book, about a girl who's like a space marine and she's trying to buff up her resume so she can apply to this elite guard, so she becomes a security guard for the ship that's always getting into trouble as they go on their trade routes. And like, I loved the idea of our protagonist, and the plot was engaging and interesting, but I hated every character because they were so annoying. And then we have a 2-star with a very mellow negative review, just not feeling this. Ooh, then another 2-star, super boring, DNF at 44%. I love how the more we're talking about these, the more patterns we see with the books I tend to not like. Boring, offensive, unlikable characters, or a mixture of all of the above. This book is about a detective on the high seas and his bodyguard, and then the ship that they're on is being threatened by this mysterious force of evil that may or may not be an actual devil. And then it's super boring because the detective gets locked up and then the bodyguard assistant guy is trying to solve the mystery, but he doesn't really do much. If you want to see more of my thoughts on this, I have a reading blog where I'm reading it and I'll link it down in the footnotes, along with all the other additional videos for these. Ooh, and then 2 stars for The Fates Divide. So this book is the sequel to Carve the Mark, which I read as a teenager and I thought was really well paced and super exciting. And like a really solid sci-fi romance where they find each other and fall in love because he's the only one who can touch her, etc. And it's really cute and fun. And then we got to this book and some of the scenes were really good. Like when they were working through their emotional difficulties and stuff, like A+, loved it. And then chapters and chapters of boring, dense politics. Ooh, next, another sequel to a book I really loved, and then the sequel, not so good. This Cursed Light, the sequel to This Vicious Grace that I read 1 or 2 years ago, and I did give it 4 stars. I thought it was very solid. But this one, the big propulsive emotions and romance of the first book were lacking here, and I think this is one of the problems that we can also see in Carve the Mark that I was just talking about, where they're both sequels where the first book really set up the romance, and then where does it go from there when you have the next book? Well, you could have their relationship degrade, but it usually feels like in a pretty cheap manner. It turns into petty drama. And even when that petty drama gets resolved, it's never satisfying because it's like, I didn't care about that petty drama. Sorry, not sorry. And then here we go, continuing. Ooh, another 1 star. Okay, I had a lot of fun with this review. The point of this review is that the book is way too wordy, so I wrote my review in the same style as the book. All of the collections of words we refer to as sentences in this book have at least twice as many words as they require in order to convey the point which they wish to make. And yet, in a bamboozling turn of events, the work in question itself, The Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, somehow still does not sufficiently explain the context, relative positioning, setting, or emotional states required to understand what is happening in any given moment where anything transpires. DNF at 10%. Because this book had the worst combo of both being like incredibly overwritten, way too many words in every single sentence, like this review, and didn't actually give you the details you needed to understand what was happening. Both too wordy and not wordy enough in the worst combo possible. So we get to add Lord of Light to the 1 stars, and Lord of Light gets to go. I hated it more than Mysterious Ways, and I think also more than the Flash Hocus Pocus. Right there. Okie doke. More 2 stars! Gave this one a long review. This one got on my nerves for a different reason than most other books. Like, it wasn't super boring, the plot was fine, the characters were fine, and there was nothing really offensive in this book. What this uniquely got the 2 stars for was too much recap of previous books in the series. This is like book 2.5. And I've read books 1 and book 2, and this was a novella. And I swear, it spent 20% of the book is recapping previous events in the series, and 30% of the book is a history lesson, also already given to us in previous books of the series, because it's like historical fiction. And then, like, you only have 50% left of the page time for the actual story? And though I did like the story parts of this, they were few and far between. Okie doke, 2 stars! So this is another thing that gets on my nerves about books that I haven't really talked about yet, which is that the book is constantly jumping POV characters. I really like it when a book is character focused, and not only focused on like the character arc of our protagonist, but also like choosing 1 or maybe a few characters to really focus on. But this book was constantly jumping POV characters and adding new ones willy-nilly just to like explain to us what was happening in the plot while sacrificing the connectivity of the story itself. Ooh, this book! This book is not actually out yet. Read as an ARC, comes out in January, and yeah, 2 stars. This one was extra disappointing because I was looking forward to this book so hard. I actually put this on my list as of most anticipated books of 2024. And most of it was just I never felt the chemistry of the romance. And the premise of this book sounds so enchanting, which is fun because the book is named A Fragile Enchantment. So our heroine is a seamstress and she can make magical clothes, and then she gets hired to make the clothes for this royal wedding. But then she has chemistry with the groom. No, boring, no chemistry. And also I think one of the things that this book really failed on, it was trying to cash in on like Regency period. Like that's how the book is marketed. That's what the cover is like, that it's really based heavily on the Regency period of England. And then it didn't actually have any of like the vibes of a historical romance. Like the book is fully embracing modern ways of speech and manners. Next up, we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I'm so sad that I didn't like this one. Because this book is beloved! It's a cozy sci-fi. So the spaceship has a bunch of wacky people and aliens on it, and they're just like going on these long space voyages and having small hiccups along the way. Because there's such a fine balance there that I love character-focused books, and sometimes cozy books are there. This one was not. This book was unfocused in splitting the energy between too many narrators, like I complained about before. DNF is 16%, because like, when I say it's following the spaceship crew, it's like following everyone on the spaceship crew, like constantly bouncing around to different narrators. It's not about anyone's like journey or character arc, it's just about like, wow, they're so quirky, fun, they're family, woo! Because like every chapter was just a new little like, wow, doing spaceship things. That was it. No actual overarching plot to be seen. We're getting near the end. Okay, now we have the fractured dark. There's only so many times you should repeat a scene without having it go anywhere. This book's 3 favorite scenes. Oh no, my emotions are being manipulated. It's a sci-fi book and it's got a lot of elements of like creepy mind control, emotion manipulation, science stuff. Time to politically manipulate someone by talking to them. Lots of just talking back and forth in this book. What if we kissed? But only if you really wanted to. Actually, never mind. Like, so many of that back and forth on the kissing. Then we have another book that I was really looking forward to because this is a spin-off book to the Kate Daniels series and I loved most of the books in that series. This one fell into the trap of info dumping the history and constantly recapping even things that had happened just chapters earlier, and I think part of this is this author, Ilona Andrews, they also write like serialized fiction on their blog, and I heard a rumor that this book started out as serialized chapter by chapter on their blog, and whether or not that's true, that's exactly how it feels. Like every chapter is like, ooh, we have a little adventure, I get to punch someone new, wow. And then the next chapter starts out, okay, remember what happened last chapter? Okay, let's recap everything for you, just you're all caught up. Okay, now, okay, time to punch someone else. Okay, done. DNF at 54%, but I tried so hard to get into this book. I really did. Okay, then we get to the end of the line. The last one to talk about is a 1 star! How we doing? So if we imagine that every offense takes off a star, here we go. First offense, it's terribly boring. Second offense, it does not live up to its cool premise. The cool premise of this is there's this intergalactic space war and they recruit elderly people. So you have a bunch of elderly people signing up to be in this war because they've heard all the rumors that the shady space army can de-age you and they all want young new bodies, so they sign up for the war. But does this live up to its cool premise? I don't feel like it does. Third offense, it already feels very dated. Like, let's see when this book was written. 2005. From the writing, I would have guessed it was written in 1980. And part of that is it's sexist. That the women in this book are all sheltered, soft, nurturing, and the men are all gregarious, abrasive, and scientists. And that's also reflected in the endings, where the men get happy, important, fulfilling endings, where they have awesome jobs and stuff, and the women get to be happy to be their wives. So, 1 star. I think if it was only dated and sexist, I would have given it 2 stars. If it was only boring, I would have given it 2 stars. But the combination, 1 star for me. So then where should we put this in the ranking of my 1 stars? I disliked this more than Mysterious Ways, but I think less than Flash Hocus Pocus, so it goes there. So my hated of my 1 stars, Mysterious Ways, To Old Man's War, Flash Hocus Pocus, Lord of Light, Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, and the most despised book of the year, the worst book of 2023, goes to Tecla. And if you liked this video, I think you'll like this one where I'm even more thoroughly hitting on things next.